Привет, moi druzy. Hello, my friends. That's Ukrainian for hello, my friends. Today is day 350. My name is Darren Gerdes, and I'm a professor that kind of goes over all the news events of the day. And what I try to do is try to find some kind of coherent theme to what is in the news. Today, I want to talk about symbolism and how symbolism matters in leadership. So we're going to talk about the State of the Union address last night. We'll talk about Zelenskyy visiting the UK. We'll talk about upwards of potentially 237 Leopard 1 tanks that could be delivered to Ukraine and the message that that would send. We'll also look at the news to talk about what happened 1 year ago today, and then we'll conclude with some fun with Russian state media. Okay, so the first thing is that last night was the State of the Union, and I'm only going to focus on those parts dealing with Ukraine and a little bit dealing with China. That's all I'm going to talk about with the State of the Union address. I'm not trying to make partisan points. I'm only trying to focus on what's going on in Ukraine. Russia's murderous assault against Ukraine is a test for the ages, says Biden. He said we stood with the Ukrainian people, and he said, as Kyiv's ambassador was there, he welcomed her and said that we're standing with you. So I'm going to show you that in just a moment. Before I do, though, I want to show you this. Over the last few days, I was talking about reputation and the importance of reputation and why this balloon issue mattered. So I'm going to start with the balloon issue.
Today, we're in the strongest position in decades to compete with China or anyone else in the world. Anyone else in the world.
Okay, so he's talking about how he's in a strong position to compete with China. Now, while there's clapping going on, you'll also notice that the Joint Chiefs are just sitting there like they're statues. This is a normal thing. They cannot be partisan. Like, by law, we don't want the military officers to take partisan political positions, so they stay statue-like. And it doesn't matter who's the president at the time. This is what the Joint Chiefs of Staff do.
And I'm committed. I'm committed to work with China where we can advance American interests and benefit the world. But make no mistake about it. As we made clear last week, if China threatens our sovereignty, we will act to protect our country, and we did.
Okay, now what's he talking about? Well, he's talking about that balloon event that happened just a week ago. So he's talking about why this matters. And I told you, it mattered even to him. I wasn't taking a swipe at Biden. I was saying we have to make sure that we're defending our reputation. That's very important. So if you haven't gone back to see these two videos, I'd highly recommend that you do. Okay, a little bit more.
Look, let's be clear. Winning the competition should unite all of us. We face serious challenges across the world. But in the past 2 years, democracies have become stronger, not weaker. Autocracies have grown weaker, not stronger. Name me a world leader who changed places with Xi Jinping. Name me one.
Now, when he says name me one, he's kind of right. Autocracies have been getting a little bit slimmer, but they're getting a little bit more antsy. They're looking to do more destructive things. But democracies have been growing stronger here as well. And, you know, somebody asked me the other day or said in the comment, thank you for caring about Ukraine. Like, they know I'm not even Ukrainian. I care about my ideals. And because I care about my ideals, I have to support Ukraine. Now, when he said, who would want to change places with President Xi? I don't know. For my money, I think Putin might want to do that right about now. Okay, let's go on and look at what Biden had to say about Putin.
Let's remember the world's watching. I spoke in this chamber 1 year ago, just days after Vladimir Putin unleashed his brutal attack against Ukraine. A murderous assault, evoking images of death and destruction Europe suffered in World War II. Putin's invasion has been a test for the ages. Test for America, test for the world. Would we stand for the most basic of principles? Would we stand for sovereignty? Would we stand for the right of people to live free of tyranny? Would we stand for the defense of democracy?
And on this point, Joe Biden is absolutely right, and I give him high marks for his willingness to stand with Ukraine, as I do for most of Congress. The high majority of Democrats and still a majority of Republicans are right there with him.
For such defense matters to us because it keeps peace and prevents open season on would-be aggressors and threatens our prosperity.
Right, and that right there is the signal that we send by defending Ukraine, sends signals to other would-be aggressors. You better not do that.
Yes, we would, and we did. We did.
Good. And I got to give him the victory lap here, and that is the point of reputation. You have to defend. If you say you're going to do a thing, you have to actually do that thing.
And together, we did what America always does at our best. We led. We united NATO. We built a global coalition. We stood against.
I'm going to say one little thing that I think he got wrong. I'm not sure that the U.S. particularly united NATO. They worked toward that. Putin united NATO in a way that no other powers could have done. He brought them together because that threat, I mean, like we weren't, another person in the comments said to me, I think it was to be somewhat pejorative to me, well, you didn't care about Ukraine a year ago. You're right, I was doing other things. I wasn't paying attention to this. And then a year ago when this hit, man, I shifted gears and totally focused on this. I let my podcast about leadership go and was just stopped talking about that and started talking about this because this is important. But you're right. I wasn't paying attention to Ukraine. I'm not Ukrainian, but this is important.
Against Putin's aggression. We stood with the Ukrainian people tonight. We're once again joined by Ukraine's ambassador to the United States. She represents not just her nation, but the courage of her people. Our ambassador is here, united. We're united in our support of your country. Will you stand so we can all take a look at you? Thank you.
Okay, now she's standing up. She's being honored. This symbolism matters. This is showing to the world we're right there with you.
We're going to stand with you. As long as it takes.
And when you say as long as it takes, you better be sure to back as long as it takes. Otherwise, you lose credibility. Okay, so that's all that I want to show from the State of the Union. I don't want to get into other partisan issues. Let's turn our attention to where Zelenskyy is now. Zelenskyy was visiting London, and Sunak met him at the airport, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. We continue to support Ukraine to assure a decisive military victory on the battlefield this year. The same message, the same symbolism. President Zelenskyy's visit to the UK is a testament to his country's courage, determination, and fight, a testament to the unbreakable friendship between our two peoples, Sunak said. Now, this is Sunak actually meeting Zelenskyy at the airport. Now, this is somewhat unheard of for the actual prime minister to meet someone at the airport, but he did it.
Great pleasure to welcome my friend, President Zelenskyy, to the UK. We've had a good chat already. We've got lots to discuss over the course of this day about how we can continue to support Ukraine in their struggle against Russia.
Now, he's at 10 Downing Street. He's meeting with Sunak. This is like visiting the White House. It's somewhat the equivalent. Also notice what Zelensky's wearing. In Tucker Carlson's universe, he looks like a bartender or bouncer or something, but he's wearing the appropriate attire during wartime to be wearing what he's wearing. Absolutely. If he showed up in a suit and tie, it would be discordant. It would be off message. It would somehow just not resonate the same way. Now, there's an article in The Guardian that gives some more nuance, and this is also important. Beyond this picture, which is symbolic enough in itself, the British offer to train Ukrainian pilots on modern NATO fighter jets is a carefully couched hint to the rest of NATO that at some point it may have to provide modern jets. That's symbolism. The UK did this masterfully early on. They offered to provide 10,000 training for 10,000 troops a month. I think it was a month. And to keep that rotation and cycle going, that was big. That was a huge show of support. Sunak said the training will ensure pilots will be able to fly sophisticated NATO standard fighter jets in the future. As part of that long-term capability investment, the UK will work with Ukraine and international allies to coordinate collective support to meet Ukraine's defensive needs, and he will also begin an immediate training program for Marines. All right, So you see the symbolism here, right? Okay, now let's turn our attention to the offer of tanks. Germany, Denmark, and the Netherlands are to send at least 100 Leopard 1 tanks to Ukraine. Now, they're not the same as Leopard 2, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Germany, Denmark, and the Netherlands plan to deliver 100 Leopard 1 tanks, as Berlin approved the export of up to 178 tanks. According to a joint statement from the defense ministers of the three countries, they'll provide at least 100 refurbished tanks, older A5 type, from the industrial stocks, within the first ones being delivered within a few months. So again, it's a race to the battlefield. A second bundle will come from Italy, where the arms manufacturer has already secured an option on 88 stored Leopard 1 tanks. Now again, they're not the same, but I had a different number, not 178. I had a number that was higher, 237. Where'd I get that? Well, Ukraine could get 237 A1 tanks. Now, 50 of these 1980s vintage tanks belong to a Belgian arms dealer, and he's holding out for a higher price than the Belgian defense minister is willing to pay. Now, that's something that they have to negotiate. The 40-ton Leopard 1 is a lightly protected tank compared to the 70-ton Leopard 2. Now, all that to say, the Leopard 1, despite its age, is still a pretty useful as an infantry support vehicle. And so getting these sent a very chilling message to Putin about what he's up against. Putin likes to talk about how he is at war with NATO, but this really sends that home. Now let's turn our attention to what was happening 1 year ago today. Here is an article from February 8th, 2022. Kremlin watchers detect signs that Putin wants to defuse the Ukrainian crisis. Does he really? In the early hours of Tuesday, Putin warned a second time in a week that European countries would automatically be drawn into a war with Russia, in which there will be no winners if Ukraine joined NATO and then tried to recapture Crimean Peninsula that Russia seized in 2014. Okay, so he's laying down his markers of what his demands are and what he wants, and he really doesn't want them joining NATO, and he really doesn't want them retaking Crimea, and he's threatening World War III if that happens. But the Kremlin news conference, which ended after 1 a.m., now remember, yesterday we were talking about Macron talking with him for 5 hours, after more than 3 months of high tension sparked by Putin's buildup of more than 100,000 troops near Ukraine's border, his intentions remain opaque. Now again, remember, people at the time didn't think this was going to happen. I didn't think it was going to happen. I thought, oh, Putin's just saber-rattling, trying to get what he wants. And he told us exactly what he wants. Here's the NPR article. Do you remember this picture? Macron sitting all the way. This is symbolism. Look how powerful I am that I can put you all the way down there. Is that the way that you have a conversation as a normal human being? No, no, no. This is all symbolism. Okay? As part of the fake attack, now they talked about this. Now, the NPR article said, as Russia threatens Ukraine, the U.S. pre-bunks Russian propaganda. Pre-bunking is before debunking. It's saying before ahead of time. As part of this fake attack, we believe that Russia would produce very graphic propaganda video, which would include corpses and actors that would be depicting mourners. Okay, so it would be kind of like Hitler's invasion of Poland when he was saying, see what the Poles did to these Germans, and that's why we have to go in there. And that's what he was planning on doing. Rather than debunking, the US and British governments are getting ahead of the potential Russian narrative and attempting to pre-bunk this with intelligence that has been being declassified. Okay, Russia has a history of literally more than 100 years of systemic, well-funded disinformation campaigns. Everybody is expecting Russia to continue in its streak of deception, active measures, and disinformation. This is just how Russia rolls. But I want you to understand, this is where we were 1 year ago today. Okay, let's have some fun with Russian state media. Zelenskyy, here's RT, Zelenskyy to set fire to Ukraine, exiled opposition leader said. President Vladimir Zelenskyy condemned Ukraine to destruction in the name of Western interests because he's too incompetent and ambitious to govern it properly, said Viktor Medvedchuk. Okay, he's the opposition leader that they traded back for a bunch of Azov fighters, like he was that important to Russia. Now, I don't think that that's the way it played out. I think Russia invaded. Zelenskyy said, I'm going to stay and fight. And the West said, you know what, if you're going to stay and fight, here are the arms to fight with. And that's actually the way that it went down. Zelenskyy was elected in 2019 as a peace candidate who pledged to put an end to the warmongering policies. Well, he said he was going to help deal with the issue in the Donbass. That is true. Zelenskyy failed to put the nation in order and found that blaming Russia rather than his own incompetence for the problems was easier. He didn't invade Russia. Russia invaded Ukraine. By the end of 2020, polls showed a decline in the popularity of Zelensky's party. That's very true. In fact, about this time last year, his presidential popularity was hovering in the 20% range. Okay, so that's where he was a year ago. The actual role of the Ukrainian president is that of a fifth columnist working against the interest of his own nation. Well, if that's true that he's a fifth columnist, the first, second, third, and fourth columns are right there with him. So I'm not sure exactly what he's saying. Okay. Exiled opposition leader, this is the same guy, accuses Western-backed forces of using neo-Nazis in Ukraine. And so what I want to highlight here is he talks about neo-Nazism as a cudgel that pro-Western forces turn to when they lose. Now, I think it's actually something different. I think that that's what Russia is using as a cudgel. In RT, they very often will say, whatever we're doing, they'll say, that's what they're doing. But it's the Russians that are saying, see all these neo-Nazis, we have to go after neo-Nazis. When I look around at the cabinet, so Shamil's government here, when I look at the cabinet and the members in the cabinet, I'm hard pressed to see anybody who's willingly, openly saying, I'm a neo-Nazi or I'm a Nazi or anything, any variation like that. When you look at Hitler's cabinet, they all said that they were Nazis. And that's really interesting that you can't find anyone saying openly, at least, like let's say there is somebody that's a closeted Nazi. Nobody's saying that they're a Nazi in the Ukrainian government. Now, symbolism matters. That's why I'm wearing this hat, because symbolism matters. Look at the flags here. This is the Azov symbol. And so I went to look this up. And this is I've seen people again and again talk about how, see the symbol, this is proof that they're all Nazis. Okay, the symbols of Azov, the idea of the nation. A modern symbol created as an emblem for the Social National Party of Ukraine, now known as the Svoboda Party, is a combination of Ukrainian letters I and N. It's a mirror image of the emblem of the SS Panzer Division, Dach Reich, division of the Nazi security services. So actually it does kind of look like this. It's a mirror image, but so what? Just because it's a mirror image, this is an actual N and an I, and this is some kind of backwards N. What does that matter? The leader of Patriot of Ukraine rejects the notion that the symbol has any connection to the wolf symbol. Organizations that use the idea of the nation symbol are far right and use other hate symbols. Okay, but let's say that they do. This alone doesn't tell us anything about their leanings. It is a symbol, and symbols matter. But this symbol resonates with people who say, I want Ukraine to be its own nation, not people who are just saying, well, let's go kill Jews or whatever the other Nazi kind of issues are. We're confusing neo-Nazi with nationalists. They're nationalists. They're very proudly nationalists. But the idea that these mean that they're Nazi or that's the swastika or it's like the swastika is a little unfounded. Now, I'm a Mets fan, and there's a fairly close resemblance between the NY for the New York Mets and the NY for the New York Yankees. But I'm pretty sure that if you ask any true Mets or Yankees fan which symbol is which, they're going to make a huge distinction. And I think that's kind of how you have to look at what's going on here. One last thing, I see the same kind of thing. I did a video early on when the war first broke talking about how like these symbols don't really matter. And I'll log this video at the end of this, and so you can go look at it. But like here is the Iron Cross, Hitler's Iron Cross, and they say, see, you see the Iron Cross, it was on Zelenskyy's shirt. Yes, the Iron Cross is also a symbol in Ukraine, but it's also the Victoria Cross. It's the same Iron Cross. I don't think that you can make much of that. So right now I'm wearing the trident, the tricep of Ukraine. That's a symbol. Symbols matter. Before, I was wearing this hat because it's a symbol and symbols matter. It shows you something about the person. So I hope that that helps you understand what we're talking about in this video. If you got some value out of this video, if you will like or subscribe, I would really appreciate it. Leave a comment, spread this somewhere, subscribe and ring the bell. I'd appreciate it. If you want to support Ukraine, I would argue one of the best things that you can do is wear this kind of symbol. If you want to support Ukraine, wear Ukrainian symbols. Put a Ukrainian flag out. Have a coffee mug with the Ukrainian flag on it. Do those kind of things to show your solidarity and your support of Ukraine. The links to this are right below. And if you want to give directly to Ukraine, there's also a link to United 24 below, and you can do that. If you want to support me, you can buy me a coffee. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.